Yeah, I can see you, ma'am. Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, yeah. So, guys, I'll
I'm
just pause.
sorry for this. I had to turn off everything and finally I had to get my mobile phone. So I
Yeah,
apologize. For some reason via desktop, but I have done other times. I'm sorry everybody. Oh gee, so terrible. But I'm
yeah,
very
yeah.
glad I'm here with you now.
Yeah, ma'am. Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. Yeah. So for context, yeah, we have been trying to set this up for a year. So, uh, so I first actually.
We were thinking this was impossible, right? More than 1 year for us to get a date, and then this happened. But
Yeah,
no, now it talk.
yeah, yeah. So, guys, I'll just pause all the live questions at the moment, so you guys can ask questions later. So, ma'am, you can let me know how much time you have, and we will just work on it accordingly. So yeah, I'll just
Mhm.
play it by ear. You can just let me know when you have to go and everything, and
Perhaps
yeah.
1 hour maximum. Really, I'm
Sure,
very
sure, sure, ma'am.
sorry,
Yeah,
but we
that's
can join
plenty.
in another time if we have more questions.
Sure, sure. Yeah, sure, ma'am. Yeah. So, I think I just wanted to, yeah, like I first saw your video back in 2018, I believe. So that was when I was really exploring like astral projections, spirituality in general. I was doing a lot of exploration back then, and that was when I came across your TED Talk video. So even yesterday, I think I linked it back as well. So it brought a lot of fond memories for me. And yeah, so I think I just wanted to start with like just give us an introduction, ma'am. Like for those of you who don't know you, like tell them what you do, and yeah.
Yes, yes. Well, I have been researching for over 30 years. Basically, the out-of-body experience, but not only, all different type of phenomena that connects us to something that some people would call supernatural. I just call it the non-physical dimension. So it's how can we integrate the physical world with this spiritual world, but in a very down-to-earth manner. And I think the many different phenomena, the out of body experience being one, but there are different phenomena that can help us very much to understand this bridge that exists between the physical and the spiritual, non-physical reality. And if we could bring more studies, more evidence, and learn to produce these phenomena, so hopefully we reduce this gap that right now exists. Many people, they live their lives, just concerned with the routine. And then there is a moment in which they are going to do a meditation or they are going to do a prayer or a practice, which is wonderful, of course. But the idea would be that we could recognize this energetic reality, non-physical reality in our everyday life and see how it influences us and how we influence others, how much this makes us feel more energized or vitalized with maybe more well inspired ideas, well inspired, I mean, healthy inspirations,
Yeah.
rather than just picking noise or ideas that are not so good. So I think we can learn that, and that's my endeavor. So I have been doing a lot of studies on that.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. Yeah, ma'am. Yeah. So so what exactly like is an out of body experience? Like how does it and yeah. So what? Yeah, you can. I think you can elaborate on that. And yeah, I have a few questions to ask you from there. Yeah.
Absolutely, yes. The out of body experience is a phenomenon that is very, it's much more common than people would think.
Okay.
And the idea is that when, in a way, we are reborn and we are here connected with this body, there is some sort of automatic mechanism, safety mechanism, like a protocol that we come in this body with this protocol in which we, as consciousness, as this awareness that we have, this essence that is alive and it's intelligent, this somehow gets connected to this body, mostly via our brain, and
Okay.
then we are kind of stuck here. We go
Mm.
places, we go sleep, and we are always seeing reality from here. But there are moments in which we reach a certain level of relaxation, mostly. That's one of the most important factors. But there are many different factors that then this essence, this self, who we really are, just disconnect from the body. And literally, the body is kind of and no more animated with our soul or our essence, because our essence would be somewhere else. It's very important to say, if you allow me here, parenthesis, Gautam, that it's not the same as a dream and not the same as a lucid dream. It's different.
Mm.
It's the situation in which we are literally awakened, more awakened than I am here now, and you guys there perhaps. We really know what's going on. We are thinking, associating ideas. We are using our discernment, our rationality, but we are not using the physical body. So that is a very, very interesting experience.
I see, I see, I see. So when I'm having an out of body experience, like, do I still keep my current identity? Like, if I'm Gautam, like, will I still see myself as that, or how does that work?
Yes, we normally do in 99% of the cases. Of
Okay,
course, this identity is our current identity
exactly.
because
Yeah,
in previous lives we have had others. But why is it that when we are outside the body, 99% of the times we manifest ourselves with this current identity? We feel like this, and even our appearance is like Nanci or Gautam. Why? Because we are so much now, it's almost like a conditioning. With the conditioning that we live this life, we have our challenges, we have the things we like, the things we dislike, the place where we live in. We get up in the morning, we see this face every morning in the mirror, and we deal with this body. So this gets so much impregnated in our minds that normally it's supernatural. We just disconnect, and there we are manifesting this image. However, suppose somebody is in an out of body experience and that person would have a past life recall, but one that's very vivid and it's long enough for the person to feel himself or herself like that life. Maybe we would see the change in their appearance. However, the identity does not change. Would be Nanci, for example, if it were me, Nanci here, knowing everything Nanci knows, having the same characteristics of Nanci, however, identifying more with that life. It's almost like when we remember a certain period of our lives and we keep thinking and we almost can, smell the scents that would be in the environment and taste the nice food we would have. For a moment, we live that reality. It's a bit as this, but we don't go really back in the past. It's more an
right.
identification. So that's why sometimes, if I can add another thing, but I think that is going to be nice, why sometimes people pass away and they are looking like 80 years old. But while time passes a bit and they regain their vitality, they start feeling better in that moment in between lives. When we meet them, not always, but many times, we are going to see our grandfather. Suppose it was our grandfather that died at 80. We are going to see him looking like younger, looking much livelier,
Right.
because we are going to manifest what we feel inside, what we feel like.
I see, I see, I see. That is so interesting. Yeah, because I always had that question, like, how will we see ourselves? So what you're saying is that, like, we will still see ourselves as us now because it's one so impregnated in our minds right now. We are so attached to this, to the point where even if we recall and associate with our past lives, it's going to be still from this frame of reference that we have right now.
Very well said. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Yeah. So I wanted to ask, because this is something that I've always wondered: is having an out of body experience the same as the term remote viewing that the CIA used to try to conduct research on back in the day during the Cold War times? Is it a very
Mhm.
similar phenomenon? Is it the same phenomenon described in a very different way? Or
It's different.
okay.
In both cases, we can see something that is at a distance. But in the case of the remote view, it's much simpler. It's more common to happen spontaneously. Most people think it's just an image, it's just a dream. They do not know they are having a remote viewing, so they don't pay attention. I've had that many times, but I think it's very difficult to control it, to really decide when to do it. So, in my opinion, you need training and you need some skills. But I have had many times, many people have that. But in the case of the remote viewing, it's almost like you are using binoculars and you are seeing something that's far there. Or suppose that you even can shift a bit like a camera, that you can move, so you go a little bit to this side and that side, but you are still conscious of your body. You are still here. You are pretty much that day, that moment, that situation, just seeing something far away. In and out of body experience, no, we disconnect from the body. We immerse in that reality. We are not feeling inside of our bedrooms. We are not feeling inside of our bodies. Other people in the situation or the environment that we manifest in can recognize us, can connect with us, can talk. We can participate. We can help people. We can interact. So it's very different.
I see, I see, I see. Okay, sure, ma'am. Yeah, because I was always like wondering about like, whether or not it was a very similar phenomenon. But yeah, thank you for clarifying that. So you spoke about skills. So I guess my question is, how does one like, okay, if I am like, going into astral projection, how do I develop this skill? So I'll share a bit of my personal experience. So it's been a while since I tried anything of this kind, but the last few times that I tried, when I was much younger, I remember there was like, it felt like even though I was in my bed, like I felt like I was in almost like a gyroscope, like, it was like, rotating, and then there was a bright white light. My body was very
Spinning like
stiff. Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. It was like that. And then like it was a bright white light, but I think towards my neck, it really felt very heavy and I could just not pop out. So I was like really stuck there for a while. And then, life happens. And then but those were like, in extreme conditions like those, that was the point that I was able to reach, but I wasn't able to go further. So what would you recommend, like, for beginners and, yeah, so I'll let you take away.
What you are describing is the most common situation
Right.
when somebody is practicing in technique. Because we practice the technique, sometimes we do everything okay, everything is ready to go. But when we start disconnecting, that moment that is literally when we are in between dimensions, so we are still connected with the physical body, but no longer completely. So we are already sensing at least the energy flow around, and that's why we
Yes.
feel
Yeah.
spinning. And when we are at that moment, we tend to get surprised by the sensation, or even with a little bit of a expectation, even if that's not a good one. Wow,
Yeah.
now I do it, now I see it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's funny. Only by having that tiny change in our internal posture, we come back. And it's a little bit difficult to control. I think there are a couple of things that can be helpful. One is practice time enough to get super, super used with the sensations.
Mm.
And there are days that in 15 minutes, 10 minutes, we are feeling we are starting to disconnect. But there are going to be some attempts that it's going to be 1 hour 15, 2 hours until we start feeling it. That's normal. So the person needs to stick to it and learn all of the different degrees of separation and get used to the sensations so that we never get surprised by a sensation. Because the sensations, they can be very vivid, very clear. Some sensations, they are like a noise in our head inside, like
Yeah.
boo. Have you ever had that,
Yeah.
Gautam? Yeah, so sometimes, and sometimes it's like a crack. It's not bad. It's not bad at all, but it's surprising. It's everything calm and then click. Of course. So we need to get used to it so we don't come back, we don't startle. That's one thing. The other thing is we need to learn how to shift our concentration, because we are super concentrated in the technique, in our body, in getting out. But sometimes when we are at this point that we are half in, half out, if we are too much thinking of getting further, disconnecting, we put our attention in the physical body. It's almost like we are trying to stand up or to sit up, as if we were in the physical body. But sometimes the disconnection is happening in completely different ways. We could be, for example, just levitating parallel, or we could be having just our feet going up and our head is still stuck, or we could be sinking in. And if in that moment we are thinking of detaching in a certain specific way, we tend to limit the possibilities of just allowing it to flow as it was going to flow. And therefore, our attention in the details and our effort to control each detail, to be able to go in that moment out, can hinder. So we need to learn when to apply effort and when to just wait a bit more and let it go a bit, just surrender to the experience. And then we do a little bit more of we put a little bit more of attention in being out, and maybe we sense a little bit more the energy around. What we should not do is bring too much attention to the physical body, our
Right.
position, and trying to detach from here. Some people feel the breathing, and that is, of course, breathing and heart beating is the synonym, right, of being inside the body. So then it's harder to detach, but all of these things are super normal. We need to practice enough to get used to it. But my biggest suggestion, I guess, tip is let it happen, and then just make sure you tap here and there without interfering too much. So in a moment that you felt all of you what you felt, what I would do would just observe, enjoy, but with no excitement. No excitement, no worry, just enjoy in internal silence so that we don't
Right.
disturb that perfect condition in which our energetic interface, like the energy that connects the two bodies, that perfect condition which is allowing it to, get looser. So that is, I guess, the
Yeah.
best attitude in that moment.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am. Yeah, because even like for me, like I remember like I would notice like I can observe like the hands will start to float. I can definitely see the sensation, but yeah, like definitely I feel like what you said, even the slightest of movements can really throw us off from that state. So yeah, you're very right in that. Yeah. You mentioned in your TED talk as well. You conducted like several research and everything. And so, what were the conclusions from that? Like, what did you find out about astral projection that you may not have realized before? Like, you may have like that made you go, hey, this is really interesting. Yeah.
Yes. Well, the main purpose of the research that I did it with Wagner Allegretti. The main purpose was to understand how recollection happens. Because for us, it was not a point to identify or to prove the out of body experience is possible. You know, people need a minimum of experience and open-mindedness even to consider that. And there are so many different experiments that have been done. So we were not concerned with that. But we see that there is a big gap in the understanding. And the gap is, if I experience something while I am out there, therefore, I am not using the physical body. I'm not using the physical brain. When I return to the body, I have to transfer that experience to the physical brain in order to remember here. And one of the situations that we see a lot is that the process of recalling, recollection, is more complex than we would think. Many of our projections we don't recall, and we know that because of different observations and evidences. But just to make a statement for now, so many of our projections we don't recall. Some of the experiences that we recall, they are just confusing because we allow some of our, like the images we already have in our brain, situations that we have framed from our everyday lives, we allowed them to interfere with that genuine information that was coming. So, for example, you have a experience in which you see somebody that has very light colored hair. And then when come into the body, just think of an actress that is blonde. So the brain did the connection because that face that we brought with us does not exist in our memory. So we just automatically create that. So we wanted to know what are the aspects that would be recalled the most and we could trust more. So we did some of these experiments and there were several things that we identified. One of the things that what is recognized first, the most impactful thing is the color of something. So if you see something that is very bright, you remember something bright. If it was golden, or if it was red, or if you saw an object that was white, like I have this here. So when we see this is the first thing. Second thing is the geometric shape. And so we did the experiment with many different approaches, but that was very interesting. Another thing that for us was new, but we identified with this research and we did not expect, was that sometimes in and out of body experience, somebody can see something of the future, but it's different than premonition. Because in the premonition, we kind of see a situation. right? People sometimes they are just having a dream and they dream of something that actually happens and they know that is going to happen. They feel it. So that is a phenomenon, the precognition. But I'm talking about something different. Let's say, for example, that we were actually doing this random um, picking of an image so that people would have to identify, go out of the body and see that image. And then we would compare their accounts. Some people, they saw in one session an image that was going to happen or to appear in the next one. But that's random. That is created in the computer. That's not even an actual image, because everything we see in the computer, it's binary. It's 0 and 1, 0 and 1, 0, 1. So it's not a real thing there. It's no information there.
Right.
And then this was possible. Whilst in the other cases, when the person saw the image that was there, while they were outside the body, meaning simultaneously, we would tend to think that is more a vision, but we do not know how to explain when that is seeing for the future. So that was interesting. And there was at least one case that happened that was, unquestionable. This was very interesting.
I see. Yeah, yeah. That is really that was really unexpected because yeah, like I wouldn't have expected that as well. Yeah. I
Exactly.
think when you spoke of color, like I think one thing that really came to my mind was in your TED talk you first mentioned, in your childhood you had an out of body experience and you saw your uncle being connected to the tubes and everything. So, what was your first out of body experience like, and how did that change your life? If you could say a little bit more about that, yeah.
My out of body experience, they started when I was around 4 or 5 from the top of my mind. Most of them, I would just see my body sleeping. If any other thing happened, I don't remember. I never remembered. I just remembered that. The first experience that I remembered something beyond was that one that I tell in the TEDx talk, in which I went to a hospital and I saw things that I had never seen. I did not know my uncle was ill. I saw him in the hospital and all of the details. That was very remarkable to me. I could not explain, like you are 7 years old, just put that aside. But I guess apart from the out of body experiences, what made me change a lot was a phase in my life later on, I would say around 13 years old, probably 13, 14, more 13s, I guess, that I moved from one house to another. And I moved, actually, my family was moving from one city to another, and we lived in several different houses until finally we were there in this specific one that we end up buying, unfortunately. But that was a very bad environment, energetically speaking, in terms of the astral level, the spiritual level there. And I have had experience before, but was not used into being able to decipher what is a positive spirit, not positive, because everything was so natural to me. But I started sensing spirits that would wake me up in the middle of the night. I never had that before. They would make me feel afraid. I would feel paralyzed. And of course, the more afraid you are as a child, the more that happens, because next evening you go to bed feeling afraid. So you're already paying attention. So it's easier for you to sense them and easier for them to wake you up. That was a very, very impactful condition, because that showed me a few things. Number one, we do not have as much as a separation between the physical and the non-physical world as we would think. Because before, sometimes I would, hear my name being called or see something or have my out-of-body experience. I had several, but they were okay and they would just happen. But at this moment, when I would enter a room and sense someone else was there, even making faces to me like this, so I would feel afraid, and I knew when they would do something and they would do it. So that made me think, wow, how can someone live like this? I didn't think of that at that moment. I was so young and I started getting traumatized, afraid I would not go to not even to the restroom by myself. I did not want to go out alone anymore. But then eventually things start, clearing up because of some procedures that happened. I guess my parents saw something that we did not know at the time and called somebody to work with energy in the house. They used what they had, so called somebody from the Spiritist religion. That's what we had in Brazil at the time. And I saw the person there, with different strategies, but I realized that the person was applying energy to try and affect this non-physical environment, and how that changed what I would sense during the night. But for me, I mean, my experiences were more clear than what I can experience here. And then I came to understand that we are not completely alone. And when we are sensitive, that can be very tough. So I grew up, funny enough, being very, very shy because of these experiences. I was very shy. I was always very, anxious about doing things right and what I would say if somebody asked me something. But then I started learning about energy techniques. I looked for that from many places. And because of this, I even wrote a book about the energy technique that helped the most. I did 15-year research technique, a 15-year research on this technique. I'm sorry. And that's because I wanted to bring that, for people, because that technique changed my life, because I could finally feel stronger energetically. Because when you are sensitive, you have a lot of good things and perceptions, but you never know if a spirit is going to come by in the middle of the night, and there you are afraid, you don't know what to do. That was my condition. So then I would sometimes sleep with the lights on. I would go to somebody's house and feel that. And then when I start doing this technique, which I perfected, I learned ways of doing it that worked better, and I wanted to help people. But Gautam, you cannot believe, it's like in 3 weeks, 2 weeks, I was another person. And then I could understand how tough it is for a person to live being this sensitive without having information and resources. And that's why now I'm doing a study on children who are sensitive for this non-physical reality, psychic phenomena. And I have researched like 70 people from 13 countries, but deep research following them, specific, very, very rigid protocol, because I want to write a book to help parents, help children that were in the same condition that I was, because I was frightened, really frightened. It was like a horror movie that only I could see.
Right. So these children, is it like in a very specific age group, or like how do you categorize them?
From my research, the age that people start having their experiences the most, it's between 8 and 13, 14. That is the age. And for me, it was also like that. But I have seen kids like 3 years old that would report, and I actually researched them, but via their parents. So I would talk to the kid with the mother beside, and I would ask things and observe the kid and work with a bit of energy, emit energy, and see if the kid would sense that, if the child would sense. So it can happen at any age. But I find it very improbable, not impossible, but improbable, based on my experience teaching this for over 30 years. I have mentored one-to-one, over 30,000 or perhaps 3,500 people. So from everything I have seen and from my research, I find it very improbable that someone who is 30, 35, 40 start having sensitivity to the non-physical world, start having some sort of perception of this subtle energy around without having had some level of sensitivity when they were children. And I think many times we just forget. So sometimes I talk to people and they say, no, I never had that before. It started at 35. And then I start asking questions. Would you have this in this condition and this? And then they say, I was not even remembering that anymore because, we don't pay attention. It was like me before this period that I was so afraid. Things would happen and okay, they didn't disturb me. To me, they were common, period. So I think that is very important. And it's very important to say to parents, Gautam, I do not know exactly your audience, but I think that's one of the things that I would like to say. You need to learn to recognize when your son, your daughter, they are just, creating a fantasy, and when it's real, when it's just a psychiatric condition, and when it's real, it's really happening to them. And what I'm going to say is that the vast majority of the cases, from what I have researched, they are real. The child is really sensing something. But we need to know how to handle. Otherwise, that becomes something else. Because sometimes a parent would come to a child and say, no, don't be afraid. It's nothing. It's just in your mind, just a dream. The parent think they are helping. They are making the child more safe, but it's not. It's the other way around, because the child is really sensing that, is seeing that. So it confuses, because many children start thinking, perhaps I'm crazy, perhaps I have a problem, perhaps I'm a liar, and because that is really real. And in other cases, parents are, so into the occult or the studies of the spirituality that they start praising that. Oh, really? Oh, did you fly this last night? You had another advice. Oh, my child. Oh, he is so sensitive. Oh, my daughter, she sees the spirits. When we do that, we kind of invite the child to pay so much attention to that and to embellish a bit. So my dream is that I can discuss this in a way that it's understood, taken seriously, and people can see this as natural, not as you are special, you are whatever, a child from another galaxy, that's why you have this. No, we are from here, period. And that's what happens to us human beings, but not saying the child is a liar either or something like this. Hopefully we get to that point someday.
Right. So neither extremes are beneficial, is what you're saying at the end. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that was very well said, ma'am. Yeah. So I think one question I really had was, like, on a practical day-to-day life, or just in general, if you will, like, what are the benefits of like practicing this? Like, if let's say someone has the ability, more probable, as you say, to astral project, what are the benefits of it? Like, what does it actually do for them?
Mm-hmm. Well, the number one thing is a sort of internal balance. Internal balance that is a result of this more stable energy around. Because we all have chakras, we all have energy. That's why it's possible to leave the body. That's why it's possible to do healing, to pick the thought of someone else, this sort of thing. So energy is responsible for all of that. But when we start doing practices, and it has to be done correctly. It's not just any practice, because some work the other way around. But when we start doing practices that they kind of reinforce our energy field, and that's what happened to me. All that I did was to start getting rid of blockages and energy that I had around that reinforced my energy field. And I felt like I could think, I could, breathe inside. So this gives us a sense of balance inside that makes us stronger. Does not mean we do not have problems, does not mean we are not going to be sad. But as compared to other people, it's totally different. And many times, for small things, a person can feel very down. And this stability with energy can make one have more condition to handle relationships. And if somebody is attacking another verbally or with energy or with bad thoughts, the other one who understands this reality, but it's not only understanding, is being able to deal with this reality, will have much better chance of succeeding, calming down, discussing whatever is the issue or the argument that needs to be discussed. There is one other thing that I think is very important. We live our lives in a very limited way, all of us. We kind of sense our bodies, but minimally. We have to pay attention to feel our heart beating, unless we are running, for example, but otherwise we do. We feel if we are very cold, if we are very warm, if there's a lot of pain, we are not even capable of sensing completely the physical body. So we live a reality that is very limited. Our concerns, people that we know, we want the best for our family, where we need to pay a bill, we need to grow, we want a new car, I want to be rich, I want to be famous. All of that is very superficial when we think of the universe per se, all of the conditions of a consciousness, human or non-human, learning, growing, one life after another, and all of this process that we were discussing before. When we have more awareness of the non-physical reality, when we have more awareness and the capacity to handle our energies, to master our energy, we can make use of our sensitivity, because we are going to have intuitions. We are going to know, well, that person is with great depression, but there is something disturbing, or there is an energetic problem. Or we know, I'm going to go tomorrow to visit somebody, and we feel, no, I shouldn't. No, I don't feel I should go. And then an accident happens. So there are many times in which this intuition, this sixth sense, that gives us the possibility of sensing what's around, many times that's very useful. And even if it's not clear to us, we are receiving no energy from around of us, from the environment, from people all the time. So I think it's very difficult for someone to see reality if that someone is only considering the physical world and our physical senses, because not even our eyes can see the real reality.
Yeah,
There are
yeah,
things that
yeah.
we don't see, but they are there.
Yeah, I think that was the first thing that you mentioned, even in your TED talk, was like you were showing
Yes,
the images
true.
of the galaxy. Yeah, yeah. I was rewatching that
True.
yesterday just to prepare for the interview, and um, yeah,
Wonderful.
yeah. So I think another thing I wanted to ask you was, because I teach like manifestation, and in that, like, they have described a lot of phenomena where just through the sheer intensity of thoughts alone, people were able to project themselves into specific locations where
Mhm.
not just the intended person saw them in that place, but others saw them as well, and they disappeared
No.
right in front of
Mhm.
them. And even in outside of like manifestation stories, I've heard like there was a father whose son was in in Africa. He was like traveling from town to town, and men did prayers for them, like 13 men, and like they were there in that place in Africa, unbeknownst to that son, and other people saw it too. So how is it that is it like with sheer intensity of thought that other people are able to witness something that is not real, and is this a form of projection too? Yeah, I just wanted to get your thoughts
It,
on it.
well, from what I have studied and the different phenomena that I had been able to read, analyze, and observe, the explanation that I had for them, and I totally believe that is possible. I've seen things that shows me this is possible. But what happens usually is that there is an out of body experience. And in this out of body experience, a phenomenon that is called bilocation happens. Bilocation is like being two places at the same time. And the idea is that the physical body is in New York and the person is there. But the person is thinking of somebody or wanting something. It's what you said is very important. It's the sheer thought of that. I want to achieve that. It doesn't help if it's just saying. It has to be inside. But then the astral body detaches goes to that place, but ends up going with a lot of energy of this energetic interface. So it's almost like the astral body gets denser, and it can be visible, can be visible to anybody. And there are many different phenomena that have been described, written with witnesses. But we have a problem in our science. Our science is not prepared to study this sort of thing, because one of the prospects that we have in our scientific environment nowadays and methodologies that every phenomenon, if it's true, if it was real, you must be able to repeat it. That was not the only time that happened. That happened many places. But you get the person and say, now you repeat it, now you do again, otherwise you are lying. It's not like that. There are many things that we only experience once. We cannot produce like this. But I've known many, many situations like those, and there are many that have been written. Many people were considered saints, when they canonized, because they had this. They were seen two places at the same time. So, okay, you did a miracle. No. So many miracles that are registered in history are actually is some sort of psychic phenomena, paranormal phenomena, including healing. There are many cases of healings. The problem, Gautam, is that then science is not equipped to study this, number one. Number two, when we say this is possible, this can happen, then people start creating, fantasizing, and then they just start telling that they have this 3 times per night. That is not, if somebody tells me that, I'm going to say, well, I have to here keep my reservations until I see this happening, because it's not the most common experience. And then comes charlatans and people who lie, and they just want more audience. And that's a pity, because a serious phenomena, start being just like with a label of everything's stupidity. And we
Right.
face this type of preconception, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Discrimination.
yeah. Because even when I was like I remember, like, even when I was discussing it with some of my friends, and you can clear this myth up as well. Back then when I was trying to do this, a lot of my friends were like, "Don't die, like, don't die trying to do something like this." Yeah, and a
Yes,
lot of people
you
were
will
like,
die,
"What
you
are you
get
doing?"
lost, right?
Yeah, yeah. So it was really, I think, I think, like, thanks to folks like you, is that these kinds of phenomena are being normalized in the society. And I think you really put it well. Just because something can't be replicated doesn't mean it's not true. So yeah, I think, like, that is something that folks have to recognize. But I think I just wanted to ask you then, why do you think is it so hard to replicate such a thing? Like, where do you think is that the issue is? Yeah.
To replicate an out-of-body experience in which the person becomes visible, that's very hard to replicate, because to do that, we need to have with us there in the astral body a very dense type of energy. So it's almost like canalizing or bringing a lot of the energy that is now in our physical body to there. It's not depleting the physical body. It's because the interface, the energetic interface between the physical and the non-physical body, it's hybrid. It has some density that is here related to the physical body. It's much subtler here where it connects to the astral body. And here in the middle, it's hybrid, it mixes. Sometimes when we are in an out-of-body experience, or few times, I'm going to change with sometimes, very few times when we are in an out-of-body experience, we can get denser. Like a lot of the energy that are here close to the physical dimension comes here, not from the physical body, from the energetic interface. In some situations like this, there are, for example, projectors that they are in their houses, and they are flying around, moving around, and they hit on something and make an object fall. How is that possible? Because the energy was denser and it created some effect. It's the same process that happens in some cases where spirits would create physical effect, move things, these things, they exist. Now, to do it in an out-of-body experience and be able to replicate it, it's difficult because most of the times when it happens, it's just spontaneous. It's just because the person is thinking of someone, is trying to send a message. You see? And then the person with all of that impulse of the mind goes there. It's not very hard to replicate an out-of-body experience. That is possible. However, the result of the out-of-body experience is hard to replicate because in one given experience, you can be, as in those cases, dense enough for people to see you or even to produce, let's say, a breeze in the room. But how can you do that again? Because it's very difficult to control the density of the energy that we carry there. It's relatively easier to make it subtler, but to make it denser, it's very hard. So that's why it's so hard to replicate. So when it happens, it's usually spontaneous. And it has to do with a very subtle aspect of the out-of-body experience, which is all of this complex gradient of density of the energy that connects the two bodies. But out-of-body experiences, if we think in terms of studying them, there is such a myriad of cases that have been reported. So many people that tell their stories, and sometimes they say, I only had this once in my life. I am 60 today. Why a 60-year-old person would lie they had one thing once in their lives, and when they tell their experience, it has so many characteristics that are universal to so many people that experienced that. And that 60-year-old never knew out-of-body experience existed, never could explain what they had experienced at that given age when they had their first and only OBE. So I think this should be enough to prompt an attitude of acceptance of the phenomenon. But there is a lot of arrogance from some people in our scientific community, some, because I know brilliant scientists, really very well renowned, that they are trying to explain this phenomenon as well. But there is a lot of arrogance because some scientists, they would say, no, I know better than you, huh? So you are telling you left your body, but I'm telling you it's just a dream. It's, it's your mind, you are creating. So that is such an arrogance. Instead of stopping and say, but why do you think so? Why all of these people are saying they have had this experience? Well, maybe it's a collective delirium, but let's study then why, right? Let's at least see that there is something there. So that is quite interesting. Having said that, I'm not saying that there are not cases in which people just create fantasies. They just confuse. They see one thing in one dream and then they mix that completely. They watch the movie and then they dream of that during the night. And of course, that's why one of the things that we do the most in the IAC, the organization that I work with, the International Academy of Consciousness, what we do the most is trying to help people and science in general to distinguish what is just a fantasy, what was just a creation of the brain, because this happens easily. But how can we distinguish those situations from a real phenomenon, real non-ordinary phenomenon? Be that, hearing a spirit to give you a message, or being able to leave the body consciously, or seeing someone who had already passed away and is there in a corner, anything. But how can we distinguish? How can we find parameters for people to take into consideration when they want to examine their own perceptions? Because, of course, there are cases in which I have an experience and I say, how is it possible that that was my mind just because I read about something, or was that a synchronicity? And so I used to say that I have 3 notebooks, but it was just a way of saying, like in my mind. I am absolutely certain this is nothing, it's just a dream, forget it. I'm absolutely certain this is a real phenomenon, very remarkable, non-ordinary, and there are things that I am in doubt. And what I do is when I study, I only consider those that I am absolutely sure. If I think they are real, but I'm not sure, I'd rather, dismiss them than just integrate them and bring maybe some deviation of the data to the study.
Right. So I guess what you're saying is that you are helping people to have that emotional maturity to kind of distinguish like how you do in your mind for the in the three different
Yes.
ways with that organization.
Yes, yes. The
That's awesome.
emotional maturity, but also the knowledge.
The
Because
knowledge,
if
yeah.
we understand how things work, for example, outside the body, how the spirit world is, what is that made of, then at least we have some parameters to examine our experiences. I have a video that I gave there in my channel that I like it. That is called, I think they are all helpful, but this one specifically is an information that's not easy to find. That is how the spirit world or what the spirit world is made of. And that is a very complex discussion. But at least I thought, let me put here a seed for us to start discussing about that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, some people think you and I can be in the same environment outside the body, and you experience one reality and I experience another. And this is not true. If we are in the same environment and we both are conscious, right? Because if one of us, we are not conscious, we will be daydreaming there. No. But if both of us are conscious, if both of us are in the same environment, we are projected at the same time. What you see, I see. Maybe one of us remember, the other doesn't. That's okay. But we see the same thing. And that is very important to say. It's an objective experience.
I see. Yeah. And I guess my last question to you is like earlier you were talking about this vaguely as well. Is the you can even heal, right? We were talking about it, and I think the common denominator with everything is the power of thoughts. So like how important are thoughts to these things? Like if someone is, let's say, like even someone who is like astral projecting like constantly and everything, or someone who wants to get into this, like how important are their thoughts? Like, do they have to set any intentions prior to this, or what are your views on like the power of thoughts? I just want to
Yes.
hear
The
on that.
power, it's very important. Perhaps is the key thing. I would say behind thoughts, there is one thing that we need to pay a lot of attention to. That is lucidity. Of course, to have thoughts, we have to be lucid. The reason why I say lucidity, because sometimes one person can be a little groggy, not very lucid, but they have thoughts. And that's why some people, they get excellent results in their goals, because they know how to set their thoughts. But others, they are trying to reach something, but the thoughts do not tune properly because there can be something else interfering. So when we are outside the body, our thoughts are who we are. Bam. It's immediately reflected in our energy. If you and I, we meet and both of us are lucid, we are conscious there properly, it's almost like we talk telepathically because you think I get it and vice versa. You are in an environment, you kind of know what that environment is for without reading. Of course, you're outside the body, but without anybody telling you, just because we get so much with our minds. And I would say thought, but behind it, lucidity and intention. But we human beings know very little how to control these things because we are so emotional. So the majority of the times when we really apply our thoughts, it's because there's some emotion pushing it. Would be very nice if we could decide where we are going to apply our thoughts and our efforts and be able to do it without having the need for an emotional stimulus, for a motivation that would be purely emotional, because emotions can, completely detour our efforts. Having said that, I need to make a parenthesis just because you said thought. And there is something that I'm passionate about
Sure.
studying it,
Yeah.
that is how often some people could have the influence or be influenced in their thoughts by non-physical presences, non-physical spirits. And I see, the more I talk to people in different situations, sessions, helping them, that is so common. It's more common than some would think. So I believe thought is number one. Without thought, we cannot even decide we are going to do tomorrow. We cannot even decide what we want for this life. Thought. And outside of the body, we are our thoughts. Inside too, but tends to be less noticeable. But one thing that we have to take into consideration is when our thoughts could be influenced especially in a negative way, because that's what we have to keep an eye on, by energy and information that comes from the environment, from other presences. So often people would go to a retreat or they are traveling and they feel like doing something. And when they get back home, wow, everything goes down the drain. Why? Because it's not because I went back to my routine. It's not only that. Very often it's because the type of presences, spiritual presences around, kind of have some level of idea of what life is, and that influences the person. And the person can feel like they are overwhelmed by thoughts. I cannot concentrate. I think of one thing, another thought comes, and often, or sometimes, negative thoughts. So when this is the case, the person should, I advise, to consider, is it possible that I am being energetically contaminated, and that contamination is then also making it harder for me to control my thoughts? Because thoughts, number one. And even to think this, we need our thoughts, right? But I think that could help sometimes some people.
Sure, ma'am. Yeah. I guess one question I had was
Perhaps we get a couple of questions, and I really have to leave. But in a couple of
yeah, sure.
questions, I
It's
think
just
at
one
least
last question.
I
Is
am so sad we
yeah.
had to take
No,
longer
it's
to
okay, ma'am.
start.
Yeah, I'm glad like even this like I'm really grateful for this. But yeah, so one question I had was what are lucid dreams in simple words? So if you could just say it in, yeah.
Yeah, lucid dreams are dreams. They happen in our brain. We are not outside the body. We are connected, or we are just slightly out. But the reality that we are thinking of is being created by our minds. So we may sit and we may know we are dreaming. So this is like any other dream, a dream, but it's a dream that is more logical. And we many times know we are dreaming, and we decide what is going to happen. We decide where we are going to go. But all is part of a dream, and we control everything. But because of these characteristics, some people confuse the dream, lucid dream, with the out of body experience. Because they would say, well, I had a lucid dream in which I kind of dreamt that I was in my friend's house. And my friend told me an experience she's going through that I was like, wow, and I talked to her about this. But you know what? Next morning, my friend phoned me, and she's really going through that situation. And I had no clue. This is not a lucid dream. This is much more than a lucid dream. So I guess the term lucid dreaming, many people refer to this as something happened when I was sleeping, but that was lucid. But many things can happen during our dreams and with being lucid. Past life recollection, dreams that are lucid, inspirations from non-physical presences, spiritual presences, good ones and bad ones. We can have clairvoyance. There are so many, and the out-of-body experience, of course, and the remote viewing. So many things. Lucid dream is one of them, but the key point of a lucid dream is it is a dream in which we know we are dreaming and which we can control. But you control all pieces. If I am in a dream, I say, if Gautam was here, it would be nice. Boom, and then you are there. You see, this sort of thing, this is more like a dream. But I think people really need to understand the difference, because sometimes they just call lucid dream what's actually an out-of-body experience.
Yeah, so just to clarify, but there are different types of dreams though. Like you can dream about
Absolutely,
okay.
Yes. Many,
okay.
And besides that, many different types of dreams. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, interesting, ma'am. Yeah, so is there anything you want to share about your your channels, where they can find you if the audience wants to find you? Yeah.
Perhaps, if you allow me, that would be nice.
Yeah, please.
Number one, to share that I have a channel that it's in English, so it's Nanci Trivellato English. It's not very brilliant name, but was the way for people to recognize my channel in English. And as I am part of the International Academy of Consciousness, I would like to mention about a program that we have that is called Consciousness Development Program, in which we kind of give a panorama of all of this from a scientific and experiential point of view, but going very further, Gautam, going into studies like what are the different levels of evolution that exist, how we see an environment that would be very dense with people who are suffering, I mean, in between lives, and what would be an environment with advanced consciousness there. So I love that. I have participated in the creation of that, and it has been 32 years this is being
Wow.
taught. It received a prize, first winner of a life transformation course in United Kingdom. Anyways, I just mentioned because sometimes there are people who are hearing us and they can think, but where do I find out more about this reality?
Exactly. Yeah.
How do I learn, right? An out of body experience and lucid dream, and how do I stop being afraid? How can I organize and cleanse my energy? So I mentioned this because it's an excellent course. I gave that to the IAC. I teach many of the classes there, but it's a donation to this organization that is a non-profit organization. But that's it. I guess that is the
Sure,
main
ma'am. Yeah, I'll
things.
leave everything in the
My
description so that
book,
they can find you.
my book. If anybody wants to take a look, it's this one here.
Sure. Yeah,
I
I'll
do not
leave
want it
yeah, the links for that. Yeah.
appearing the other way around, but just to mention, if in case anybody wants to
Sure,
learn
ma'am.
this
Yeah.
technique, right?
Yeah.
Because the technique, I teach the technique in one of the videos there in my channel, so it's there. It's free, and it's called VELO, Velo, Voluntary Energetic Longitudinal Oscillation, and there are so many interesting results from this. Well, it saved my life, so that's why I put this into a book.
I intend, I intend that it reaches as many people as possible, ma'am. Yeah, so once again, thank you for joining, ma'am. And yeah, so I intend to do more videos with you down the line as well. And thank you to your team as well for
I hope
coordinating
so.
everything back and forth. I know your team
Yes,
was really
yes.
very cooperative and they were always like very nice in reaching out and everything. So I just wanted to thank them as well. So yeah, ma'am. Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
It was a pleasure, and thanks to
it was
all
a
of
pleasure,
you who
ma'am.
are
Yeah,
here live and those are going to watch on replay. It was really good. Thank
yeah.
you, Gautam, for the
Thank you, ma'am.
opportunity and for considering me to be here with you.
Anytime, ma'am.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Bye. Yeah,
Goodbye.
yeah. Goodbye, ma'am. Yeah.